You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, it's early morning. Well, not really, but I got up a little early today so I could do this, accommodate schedules, and it's up and early. And when you get used to driving at a certain time to come over here, you get used to the traffic flow.
That's what messes me up is when I get up at different times, the traffic.
Yeah. Well, I hit the lights. The lights are actually fairly good, but then they had school zones. And then we had the train, of course. It wouldn't be Crowley without the train.
Gotta love the train.
No, I don't. But anyway, it's just a different deal. But anyway, I came in early to accommodate schedules and also to, since, I don't have a guest today, it's just going to be me rattling on about what's going on in Syria. So no big deal. How you liking that new software there, Taylor?
It's the best.
The best
Let
ever.
me tell you.
The best ever. Yeah, I know. That's why we're a couple minutes late because like, wait a minute. We were.
Thank you, Restream.
Yeah, I know. Well, it is what it is. But we're going to talk about what's going on over in Syria. And if I act like I know what I'm talking about, well, let's just go with that because it's still a very, very fluid situation. And, anybody says they know what's going to happen and they don't. I'm going to sit there and do this, go ahead and share this with all my vast listening audience and whatnot. But anyway, how you doing today, Taylor? You doing all right?
I'm doing all right.
Doing all right? It's a living?
It's a living.
What do you got going on for Christmas?
Oh, just sticking around town with my family.
Are you not going to Tennessee?
I wish. I tried to book a trip before the end of the year, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah, well, today...
I'll go early next year, don't worry.
All right, thanks.
I am going to COSM for the Tennessee at the Ohio State.
Oh, that's right. You told me you got tickets for that.
Yes, I did.
That's going to be
Merry Christmas to my parents.
Yes, Merry Christmas to you. I mean, that's
no
going to be
Let's be real.
That's going to be a great experience go to Columbus, Ohio. It's one of the great college football
I'm going to
stadiums.
COSM.
What?
It's like the dome, like the sphere, like the...
You talking about in Vegas?
It's in Dallas.
Oh.
I'll send you photos. I'll share photos.
I thought you were going to Ohio.
Well, you're going to think I am. You're going to think I'm
Well,
there.
that's close enough, I
Close
guess.
enough.
Anyway, so we're just here chit-chatting. So let's go ahead and talk about our sponsors. Then we're going to, also at the end of the show, we're going to talk about some big news that was announced at the city council meeting last night. And it's going to bring, quote, a lot of dough to Burleson. Anyway, so thank you, Otto, at our place. Hope you all are doing well. I'll be seeing you pretty soon, no doubt. He's going to be, he asked me to tell y'all that our place will be open Christmas Eve, but not Christmas Day. But if you're going to order a pie, you better do it now because they do a lot of pie business, because their pies are very good. But not only that, they're affordable, and not only that, they're convenient. And so if you want to have a pie for Christmas, you better order it now because if you walk in there a couple of days ahead of time, you may be out of luck. So check that out. Also, Gina's will be closed Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but they'll be busy, I'm sure, during the holidays because you'll get tired of family pretty soon. You get tired of cooking, you get tired of the kitchen. So go over to Gina's and get yourself a pizza or some pasta or a sandwich or something like that. You'll be good to go. Also, thank you to our friends over at Wild Cigar. They got a big party Friday night you might want to drop by. They've got some drink and cigar specials. It's their 3rd-year anniversary. They're going to be celebrating 3 years of business here in beautiful Burleson, and they got all sorts of specials going on. Of course, during the Christmas holidays, they're going to have all the ball games on. There's going to be a bunch. You're going to be pretty saturated with football by this time next month. So you'll have that going on, and it's a good place to watch a ball game because you can hear yourself think. It's not like this sensory overload that you get some places. So go check out Wild Cigar and have yourself a drink, a cigar, and a good time. Also, well, I can tell you Southern Jim's very busy. Robin comes home exhausted because there are just a lot of people coming in. Kayla's really developed a reputation here in this region, and not just in this town, but they got people coming in from pretty good distances to come to Southern Jim. So check out what they got going on over there. And the thing is, if you want something like repaired or designed or whatever, you better go in today. All right, it's not like you can walk in on the 23rd or whatever and say, hey, I need this repaired real quick for Christmas morning. That ain't going to happen. They're getting pretty booked up on that. So you better go do it now if you're thinking about doing that. Also, check out all the specials they got going on over there, and they have extended hours, and they're up till 8 on Thursdays and 6 o'clock now on Saturdays every Saturday this month, except for the one in between Christmas and New Year's. And our friends over at Old Pro, thank you, John, 817-734-2756. Good time to get the roof checked. The weather's good for a while. You can check it out. They'll tell you what's going on with your roof. They'll help you with the insurance if you need repairs or a new roof. So what I said, 817-734-2756, that's the number. And what I like and respect about John is you're going to get the straight story about your roof. You're not going to get upsold. You're not going to get doomsday prognostications or whatever else. So have him help you decide what you need to do about your roof, because that, if your roof isn't good, then everything else is going to have a real problem. And if you have a real need to buy a new house or to move, Jeff Kelly's the man to talk to at 817-781-0546. The real estate's still booming along. As far as the rates, they're kind of they're drifting downward. People think they read in the paper that the Fed cuts the basis points about 25 or 50, and they think it's automatically going to apply to mortgages, and they're starting to now. And talk to our friends at Camco if you want to get the more clear picture. Candy Gal will straighten you out about that. But call Jeff at 817-781-0546 or Jeff at jeffkellyrealty.com if you're looking to buy or sell in this area, and he'll help you right out. Also, our old friends at Hot Works are back. Michelle was on last week when I was talking about proper hydration and taking care of yourself during the holidays, because things can get away from you. You're not drinking the normal amounts of water because you're running here, there, and everywhere, and at parties and whatnot. So you need to maintain that, and also the infrared system that she has for workout it maximizes the effectiveness of it, and it's a great place. I've been there several times. Customer care kind of thing. And, it's secure. It's 24/7, so you don't have to worry about security at all. They got a very a good system over there, and they got a lot of different opportunities. There's like 11 different activities you can do. So if you're looking for a workout and under an infrared system, which again, this isn't like throwing iron around. This is, they got just about everything you can think of. You've been over there before, right?
I have.
What did you use?
I used the rowing one and like the elliptical one.
Okay.
Which are really cool.
Yeah, it is. And it's not overly stressful, right?
No, it was fun.
That's
I
good.
liked it.
Okay. And also, thank you, friend Tiffany. The magazine's out. They got a lot of magazines floating around this area because 30,000 people have them, plus a lot of businesses. On the cover is 7 of the nonprofit leaders in this area. So it's worth a read right there. And they do so much. And on that topic, I talked about this yesterday with the mayor, and I'm going to reiterate it routinely. This is a good time to give, not just because of the Christmas season, but because the last 2 weeks of this month, there's no school, and therefore for a lot of kids who depend on breakfast and lunch at school, they're going to have to kind of fend for themselves. So go by either Crowley House of Hope or Promises Community or Harvest House. Pick one of your choosing and drop off some stuff, particularly stuff they could use that kids can make themselves. Stuff that they could put in the microwave or sandwich making stuff or things of that nature. Because that's a real stress for a lot of people. Okay. Where do we start? Start with the headlines. All right. This is what we woke up to on Sunday morning. The speed and the quickness and just the suddenness, I guess is the best word I could think of, astounded me. The thing about this situation in Syria, it stayed there for quite some time, somewhat stable. But now it's like, you wake up and you read this: Assad flees to Russia as Syrian rebels claim power. The Assad family, father and son, have been in charge of Syria since 1973. And it is a brutal dictatorship on both counts. And the revolution, if you will, the civil war in Syria, it's really more of a civil war than a revolution. The civil war started in 2011. I'm going to get into those kind of details in a minute. And for the last 12 years, Bashar Assad has been absolutely brutalizing his people. And the fact that this all took place in about a 10 to 11 day period where this group that came out of nowhere practically, I'm sure people that follow this more closely may have heard of it. I never heard of them. The group is called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which means I don't know what that means. That's Arabic for you. Yeah, I don't, Anyway, it's an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, but people are all thinking, well, does that mean Al-Qaeda's taken over? No, they broke away from Al-Qaeda quite some time ago because of differences in ideology and differences in what their goals were. And supposedly, and I put that in very big, bold letters, supposedly, this is a more moderate group that wants to have a more moderate civil government than what Al-Qaeda would have imposed. Now, all this has to be taken with a great deal of caution and a grain of salt, because we are dealing with somebody that is on the terrorist watch list in the State Department. They've been under a named terrorist group. What was the other headline I sent you? This one's the Washington Post. And Saturday afternoon, this wasn't really even considered. Sunday morning, when I say this isn't considered, what I mean to say is Assad they were thinking, well, he'll probably survive this like he has several other attempts. Within 12 hours, he's on a plane to Russia with his family. And we're going to talk about who really is the winners and losers of this conflict. And definitely Russia is a big loser on this one. So is Iran. And so we'll talk about that. But we also have a brief news clip from Sunday night. I'll probably just interject in it every now and then. And so, Taylor, if you'd run that clip, please.
Tonight, new headlines here at home and overseas with the toppling of Syria's dictator and the new images of a person of interest in that CEO killing. Celebrations in Syria after rebel fighters took down the government. The country's leader, Bashar al-Assad, escaping to Russia. Rebels raiding his palace. But what comes next? The U.S. carrying out dozens of strikes on more than 75 ISIS targets inside Syria today. What the upheaval means for the hundreds of American troops inside the country.
It's also a moment of risk and uncertainty.
And what it means for the American held hostage there. New images tonight, the person of interest in the CEO murder case, the moment when he caught a cab after the killing. Scuba teams searching a pond in Central Park today for the gun. Plus, the surprise police found in a backpack. Monopoly money.
Is he signaling something, or is this kind of a diversion for investigators?
An NBC News exclusive, our Kristen Welker, one-on-one with President-elect Trump. His new plan for mass deportations, whether he wants Liz Cheney prosecuted, and will he pardon the January 6th rioters? New sightings of those mysterious big drones, the size of small cars, swarming over New Jersey, and the police now taking to the air themselves to try to figure out what's happening. And as Notre Dame finally reopens its doors this weekend, we will introduce you to the carpenters and artists who rebuilt the cathedral, now using a different tool to celebrate it, their voices.
This is NBC Nightly News with Hallie Jackson.
Good evening. We begin tonight with the new fallout after the dramatic collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, with the rebel groups that forced out the country's dictator capturing the capital of Damascus, setting off celebrations across the country today. You heard it there. You can see it here. Statues toppling, people jumping on top of them. Elsewhere, rebels appearing to release prisoners from their cells. The country's now former leader, Bashar al-Assad, believed to have escaped to Russia, finding safe haven with the Kremlin, as we're learning late today of the new U.S. airstrikes inside Syria meant to keep ISIS from trying to step into any leadership vacuum. Tonight, so many questions about what happens from here, including for the U.S., which has hundreds of troops stationed inside Syria. We have team coverage tonight, starting with Raf Sanchez.
Tonight, scenes of triumph across Syria as rebel forces celebrate their stunning victory over the Assad regime. More than 50 years of dictatorship by one family ended in a 2-week lightning advance by rebel fighters. Tonight, those fighters shooting open the doors of regime prisons, freeing political prisoners, including women and children, while the marble halls of a tyrant's palace echo with the cries of ordinary people. But Syria's ousted president Bashar al-Assad evading capture, fleeing to Moscow with his family, according to Russian state media. The uprising against him began peacefully in 2011 with calls for democracy, dignity, and reform, but mutated into a pitiless civil war after Assad turned his guns on his own people. For years, that bloody strategy seemed to work, but with his Russian backers bogged down in Ukraine and allies Iran and Hezbollah weakened fighting Israel, the rebel attack revealed a brittle regime that quickly collapsed. The rebels' main leader speaking tonight from a historic mosque in the capital, promising a government for all Syrians, regardless of sect. Some minority groups, though, frightened at how the Islamist fighters will govern. They were once part of Al-Qaeda and still considered a terrorist group by the U.S. But for much of Syria, hope.
Now I can understand that my children will not be raised under oppression.
Abdul Kafi Alhamdo and his family survived years of regime bombardment. This was the moment he saw his father for the first time in 2 decades, reunited after the front lines collapsed.
We're free, Syria! We're free people!
So much emotion there tonight. Raf joins us now. And Raf, what happens in Syria has a hugely significant impact on the rest of the region, including where you are in Israel.
That's right, Hallie. Israel now saying it has deployed troops inside of Syria in a bid to prevent the conflict there spilling over into Israeli-controlled territory. Hallie.
Raf Sanchez, thank you. Nearly 1,000 U.S. troops are based in Syria, with the country a haven for terror groups that target Americans. Now, late today, the U.S. military says it struck 75 terror targets across Syria. Ali Rafa has the latest from the White House.
At long last, the Assad regime has fallen.
Tonight, President Biden reacting to the fall of the Assad regime and quick military action in Syria.
Just today, U.S. forces conducted dozens of precision strikes.
Those strikes hitting more than 75 ISIS targets, including camps, leaders, and operatives. The White House hoping to prevent a resurgence by the terror group in the region.
We're clear-eyed about the fact that ISIS will try to take advantage of any vacuum. We will not let that happen.
The president committing to protecting the roughly 900 U.S. troops he says will remain in the country, while offering a blueprint of future U.S. support.
I'll send senior officials from my administration to the region as well to establish a transition away from the Assad regime.
Despite this, the president expressing cautious optimism after the rebel takeover of Syria.
It's a moment of historic opportunity.
While making clear the country's future is still uncertain, acknowledging the connection between the rebels and terrorist groups.
Make no mistake, some of the rebel groups that took down Assad have their own grim record of terrorism and human rights abuses.
Mr. Biden also committing to securing the release of Austin Tice, an American journalist and Marine veteran kidnapped in Syria more than a decade ago.
We believe he's alive. We think we can get him back. We have to identify where he is.
Tice's family, who had criticized the Biden administration for not doing more, hopeful tonight the fall of the Assad regime creates an opportunity to bring Austin home.
We are hopefully and prayerfully and joyfully waiting to get the news that Austin is walking free today.
Ali Rafa is joining us now from outside the White House. Ali, what do we know about how the incoming Trump administration may handle Syria?
I'll talk about the Trump administration coming in, because basically I could tell that in a very, very short clip about Mr. Trump has said on his True Social that the United States will not have any role in this, and it's not our fight. Let's stay out of it, which I 99% agree. I mean, we can't take our eye off the ball, but I don't think it's something that we are going to have a role in as much as Mr. Biden would like to think so. And, he was taking credit for some of this about how his policies helped bring down Assad. And I'm just thinking that's just sad. It really is, because what really caused this to happen in the bigger picture was Israel and Turkey. All right. Turkey is the main backer of some of these groups, but Israel put a lot of pressure on the other main backer of the Syrian regime, which is Iran. And by Israel's aggressive policies against Hamas, which is, kind of somewhat attached to Iran, and Hezbollah, which is very much attached to Iran, and because they put those down so thoroughly, it put a lot of pressure on Iran that they couldn't keep up their presence in Syria. Plus the fact that Israel had assassinated some of the leaders of not just Hezbollah and Hamas, but a couple of leaders in Iran itself. The Iranian regime is in very, very serious trouble. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. We're going to talk about who these people are first. The group is called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, like I mentioned earlier, and they are an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, but they're not associated with Al-Qaeda anymore, and they haven't been for roughly a decade. And one reason why they split from Al-Qaeda is that Al-Qaeda has a very strong theocratic Islamist ideology about how they want to govern and rule and things of that nature. And according to this new group, they want to be a bit more pluralistic is the word. They're making all the noises about how they're going to allow the Christians and the Syrian Jews, which still are there, and the Kurds to basically have religious freedoms and things of that nature, and that they're not going to go into any kind of Islamic state, kind of like what similar to Iran. Now, it will be based on Islam. It will be a conservative government, very much so, but they've also said they're not going to be really oppressive about women's rights and things of that nature, and they're not going to be affiliated any longer with terrorist activities of any kind. We don't have a relationship with this group because they are on the terrorist list, and therefore we have no contact with them. So if we have any contact at all, it's through Turkey. And so basically that when we want to get word to them, and have been the last 3 or 4 days, we've gone through the Turkish diplomats and their embassies and whatnot. And I'm quoting from the New York Times, the groups responded through the Turks with assurances they had no intention of allowing the Islamic State to be part of their movement, according to U.S. and Turkish officials briefed on the messages. And the people that had been under the control of this Islamic group, this Al-Sham, up in the north and the northeast part of Syria, are reporting that they had not been oppressed by this group, and that the Christians there have been allowed to celebrate their holidays, including upcoming Christmas holidays, and that the Christian churches have not been destroyed or harassed. And now, so I'm hoping that they will bring that to Syria as a whole. But let's make no mistake about it. This is not going to be a democracy or anything like that. It's going to be a conservative Islamic state. It's going to be, hopefully, it'll end up resembling something like Jordan. Okay. Saudi Arabia is not the best example because there's no democracy in Saudi Arabia. It's run by the royal family there. But as far as Syria, they're not talking about so much like a democracy like we have here in America, and nor should we try to impose one. We tried that with Iraq, and it's not working out very well. And one of the things I teach in my class is that you can't just transplant democracy without all the roots being well developed. And the reason why democracy so much worked here so much better is we had 150 years of practice at it with the protection of the British Empire, and we had a history of self-governance. To take our system and transplant it like we tried with Afghanistan and Iraq just doesn't work because they don't have the culture yet for it, and they may not have one for, I don't know, quite some time. You know, we always think that democracy is the direction all governments will head. That's not true at all, and we know that. But anyway, I'm getting off the topic a bit. But the point is this group is not promising to be like what we are, but they are promising more individual civil liberties and rights, and they are promising within the Islamic framework a democratic style of elections and things of that nature. So maybe it'll become I think the best way to look at it may be closer to Turkey, which is pretty strongly Islamic, but it's based on secular principles, a lot of it. And so hopefully they will resemble more closely to that. And let's be very clear about Turkey. I mean, they're not anybody's idea of a full and free liberal society, but more so than, say, Iraq or Iran, certainly, or even Saudi Arabia. Now, Taylor, put up the picture of the two Assads, will you? These two people here. On the right is Hafez Assad. He was an Air Force colonel that took over in a coup in 1973, and he was absolutely brutal. Okay, in 1982, there was an uprising in a town called Hama by the group that's still around, but you don't hear much about, the Muslim Brotherhood. And Hafez just bombed that city and killed 20,000 people. And then what was not destroyed in the bombing, they just bulldozed it and paved it over with concrete. And so 20,000 people, just like that. And he died in 2000, and his son on the left here, Bashir, is an ophthalmologist, a doctor, eye surgeon, actually, educated in Britain. And he just is brutal. There are 336 documented cases of him using chemical weapons against his own people, including a massive one in 2013. I have to say this. The Obama administration was abysmal in dealing with Syria. This in 2011, you had an uprising all throughout the Middle East called Arab Spring. It happened in Egypt. It happened in Saudi Arabia to some degree. It happened in Syria, certainly. And what you were having was pro-democracy rallies and things of that nature. And in Egypt, it somewhat worked. In Syria, it led to this civil war. And in 2013, he was threatening, Assad, was threatening to drop chemical weapons on his rebels. And Mr. Obama, President Obama, said, well, if he does that, he's crossing a red line. Well, 2 weeks later, he killed thousands of people in the next couple of weeks after that with chemical weapons. What did Obama do? Nothing. Zip. Nada. Doodah. He said nothing happened. He took it to Congress for the only time in his career. He passed that decision on to them, and we didn't know what to do about it. The president basically allowed this to go unpunished. And does, we all say, well, this will lead to this event. Did it lead to the Russians being more aggressive, the Iranians being more aggressive in Syria? Absolutely. Because they knew they could operate with impunity. And Russia was the main supporter, and Iran also was the main supporters of the Syrian regime of Assad. Russia has military bases there, a big one on the Mediterranean coast, one of their major naval bases there. And that kind of on a side note, I know a lot of the Russian personnel left, but not all of them. They still got a military presence there. I'm just wondering what Putin's going to do. Is he going to strip those down because he's having a problem in Ukraine, or is he going to hold on to them? And if that happens, we're going to see more conflict quite a bit. The Iranians had several military bases there and presence there, and they were a main supplier of weapons for Syria. Syria was the main conduit for weapons to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And so these two countries basically kept Assad afloat for all these years. And the Civil War became kind of roughly a stalemate over the last several years, where some of the rebels were holding territory in the north and northeast, but the main body was main government. I'm saying it that way. The main government was still operating the majority of Syria. I sent you that map, didn't I? Yeah, I did. Okay. This map, I don't know if you could see it as well as I'd like for you to see it, but anyway, Damascus is in the southeast, and that's the main capital, of course. But Aleppo is up in the northwest part of the country rather. And Aleppo actually is the biggest city in Syria, and it fell a week ago. Aleppo is a site of the main body of fighting. And when it fell suddenly, it just like the whole house of cards came apart. And the Iranians, who had been greatly weakened by Israeli activity, could not afford to take another massive loss. And so they got out of Syria very quickly. Russia is being bled to death by this war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine has done more damage to Russia in many ways than they've done to Ukraine, which is saying a lot. Ukraine, particularly that eastern region's been pretty much leveled, but Russia has spent untold amounts of money and manpower to try to take Ukraine, and they're no closer to doing it now than they were a year and a half ago. And Russia is running out of men. The situation at home is getting more and more chaotic because they're having to use, oppression to keep the protests down. Financially, they're still doing okay because they have all that oil and they're still finding markets for it. But they're running out of the will to fight in Russia, and so Putin could not afford to keep sending material, money, and manpower to Syria, and so they abandoned it. Both those countries did, and so it's dramatically transformed the political balances in the Middle East, to say the least. So, I read a whole bunch of stuff. As you can see here, I got about 30 pages of reading to do. I'm not going to read them all to you because, why do that? But what was happening is that let's talk about, some of the winners and losers, if you will, this. Certainly the losers, no question, Assad family, and there's they left. What really bothered me, this is a side note as well, about the American treatment of Assad, particularly in the Obama administration. They were trying to portray him as like a new type of leader, okay, as a new type of, enlightened Middle Eastern leader. Secretary of State Clinton was over there and she was talking about how, we could do business with this guy, and Obama's talking about, developing new relationship with this guy. And then this Arab Spring comes up and Obama does nothing, and Assad hammers his own people and then gasses his own people. And everybody else is like, well, I never said he was. Let's just talk about other people, blah, 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 blah. The Obama administration was completely hoodwinked by this guy. As far as the Assads, though, shed no tears for them. They're as sadistic a bunch of killers as the Middle East has ever seen. Another loser, definitely Iran. They had a whole dream of a Shia-based, that they called a crescent of Shia, from going from Syria through Iraq, through Iran, and then exporting it everywhere else. The Assad family, to get into the details here, are not part of the majority Sunni population. About 88%, 85% of the population is Sunni. The Assads were part of a Shia sect called the Alawites, and I don't know if you ever heard of them before because they're not very prominent. But they were an offshoot of Shia, and so that was a connection between Iran, which is Shiite, and the leadership of Syria, which is Shiite. And then the rest, about 5 or 6%, that the Alawites are about 10% of the population, and the rest are Christians and Jews. All right. The vast Sunni majority greatly resented the Shia regime. I mean, the differences between Sunni and Shia are significant, and they're hostile. And some people who just kind of glance at this think that they're all on the same page of the Quran, so to speak. Very far from it. The Shia and the Sunni hate each other, and they have been at war with each other for centuries. And so to have a majority Sunni country run by their hated religious opponents was particularly galling. Okay, but Iran's dreams of this crescent, if you will, of Shia leadership and to export that throughout the Middle East is, well, for the time being, as dead as Caesar's ghost, because they're losing their influence in Lebanon. They've lost it in Syria, and Iran is under serious economic problems. Do not be surprised if one of two things happen under the Trump administration, that the Iranians say, let's renegotiate, or they withdraw and go all in for a nuclear bomb capacity. It's already thought that they have the capacity to make at least 4 bombs. Now, they're not the same yield and tonnage as like what we saw in previous episodes, but it's bad enough. Now, Mr. Trump has said as soon as he gets in there, he's going to make Iran pay even worse. Mr. Biden, in a misguided attempt to try to negotiate and re-engage with the Iranians, let go some of the embargoes and some of the sanctions that Mr. Trump put on in his first term. Trump has said first day he's going to put them right back on, and he's going to put a lot of pressure on Iran, and they're either going to capitulate or they're going to withdraw and become even more antagonistic, one of the two. But I do support Mr. Trump's use of sanctions. I think it's craziness that we allowed in the last 4 years under Biden for Iran to basically re-equip and rearm itself because we loosened up those sanctions. Another big loser, of course, I just mentioned is Russia, because they lost a lot of prestige. They lost a lot of influence in the region. Syria was their base from which they did a lot of Middle East mischief, if you will, and they saw themselves as a major player in the Middle East not any longer. And so the Russian-Iranian relationship still exists, but they're both in a weakened state. Other loser is going to be Hezbollah, definitely, and some of these terrorist groups that have been supported by Iran. They're not going to have the money. They're not going to have the support. They're not going to have the military equipment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, who are the winners? Turkey's a big winner because they are supporters of this group, this Al-Sham group. Taylor, put the leader of that group on there. Mohammed al-Jalani is his name. This is the guy that led the group. He's about mid-40s from what we know. And he is the one that's saying, he was on CNN and had an interview with the New York Times saying, we are going to be, less dictatorial, and we're going to allow for individuality and, people to pursue the religious occupations and opportunities and beliefs and whatnot, and that they're not going to impose upon women a lot of the restrictions that say go on in Afghanistan. Now, again, we have to take all this with a big grain of salt because they are a terrorist group by our standards. Have they reformed? Let's not get too far ahead of this. I mean, I read from both left and right columnists saying it's hopeful, but let's not forget who we're dealing with here. And even the Taliban, when they took over Afghanistan 3 years ago, said that they're going to take a different approach, but they haven't. And the oppression of women is just as bad as it's ever been. We'll see what happens in Syria. One advantage Syria does have, it is a more ancient and more developed culture than Afghanistan. Syria is one of the oldest civilizations on our planet. Okay, and so they have a long, long history. And so we'll see what happens with that. Another winner definitely is Israel, because it's not like Syria and Israel are going to be on the same page anymore, or if they're named for war, of course. But Syria constantly posed a threat to northern Israel, particularly along the Golan Heights, which is the bordering region between Israel and Syria. And in 1967, Israel took over the Golan Heights from Syria in that war and never gave it back. And Syria always wanted it back. Will this group want it back? They haven't said so. We'll see. But Israel definitely is a winner. And I have to really admire Israel because they were attacked and they were, and they responded, and they were criticized and abused. And a lot of people here in the United States despise Netanyahu and the Israelis for what's going on in Gaza and in southern Lebanon. But my point would be, if that happened to us, we'd expect the same kind of response and not a lot of yik-yak about it. And because the Israelis would not bend to international pressure or opinion, they're in a lot better position than they were even before that attack a year ago, October. And what people don't really realize, at the last part of the Trump administration, there was an agreement called the Abraham Accords that was somewhat of a understanding, let's put it that way. It was not a treaty of any kind, but it was an understanding between Israel and Jordan and Syria and, not Syria, sorry, I meant Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And maybe this group, who knows, if they really are truly more enlightened and really want to be part of the international community and all this other stuff, maybe they'll join that accord. That accord basically, the Abraham Accord, is basically an understanding about mutual security and things of that nature. So we'll see about that. I don't know. As far as the United States, we don't really have a role in that. And despite what I read a couple articles about how Joe Biden was trying to take credit for it, but that I just thought that was pathetic. I really did. Joe Biden has no role in this. Now, just the side note here is that yes, we did bomb 75 ISIS targets. Why did we not do this earlier? Because we didn't want to deal with the Russians. All right, and so, but now these 75 targets, are ISIS camps, whatever. One thing that the United States can't allow is we can't allow Syria to become what Afghanistan did, which was a haven for all these other groups. Al-Qaeda got formed in Afghanistan because of the lack of governance there. And so we can't allow ISIS or Al-Qaeda to occupy ungoverned areas of Syria and begin and reestablish themselves as terrorist groups. And, again, it gets confusing, but there are several, it seems like a dozen or more, but there's quite a few of these terrorist groups based on Islam. But we should not all think that they're a united front by any means. ISIS and Al-Qaeda hate each other. Al-Qaeda and the Taliban hate each other. All right? ISIS and the Taliban hate each other. This group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, I'll get it right, used to be called the Al-Nusra group. They don't like these other groups either. They all, the reason why they hate each other is because they're all competing for the same thing, their version of Islamic rule. And they think of the others as apostates and heretics and things of that nature. And so they despise each other. And the idea that all these groups are going to kind of band together isn't going to happen, because some are Sunni, like Al-Qaeda, some are Shia, like Hezbollah, and then even within the Sunni, ISIS is Sunni, but they don't think the Al-Qaeda is the right kind of Sunni, and on and on and on. And so this idea that they're all one large conglomeration is not true. And so there you go. Now, as far as any prognostications, if I had any accurate predictions, I'd be talking to somebody else. I'd be calling Joe, Don, let me tell you all about it. But here's what I hope happens, and that is that, first of all, the United States re-engages with Syria, but they don't try to impose upon Syria American-based democracy and ideas. I love them. I think they're great. They have these ideals, but they're not going to work under their system. I think I'd like to get to a point we deal with them like we do the Saudis or the Jordanians or the Egyptians. Second of all, another thing I'd like to see is that Russia and Iran completely withdraw. They still have presence there, but they're withdrawing, and hope that continues. Another thing I'd like to see happen, I would like to see the Iranians come to the negotiating table, because they're not dealing with Joe Biden or Barack Obama. They're going to be dealing with Donald Trump, who, whatever you want to say about him, good, bad, or indifferent, Donald Trump is not going to mess around with these guys. He's not going to give red lines that aren't kept. And the thing about it is, you look at the first term of Mr. Trump, he was not particularly aggressive in this region. There was one incident that he sent jet fighters in early in his term, but towards the end, he was wanting to withdraw all the terms. Come on in. I don't know who this is, but Taylor, is this a friend of yours? Yes. No problem. It's informal. Just have a seat. All right. Anyway, I'm just talking about Syria, and so anyway, my point is that now I lost my train of thought. No, I was kidding. My point is that Donald Trump is going to deal with this a lot differently. But back to his first term, towards the end of it, and I remember having a show on this when we were still at the Hub. I was very frustrated because he wanted to withdraw totally from Syria. Well, we need to have a presence there to keep ISIS and others down. But I think when these nations deal with Mr. Trump, they're going to be dealing with a whole different attitude than what they faced with Obama and Biden, which is much more accommodating and conciliatory than Mr. Trump is. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's been a very interesting time, and it's going to continue to be an interesting time. Now, if 2 years from now, I'm sitting here talking, and this al-Jilani fella has turned into another version of the Taliban, and it's all tearing up the country and all this other stuff, I wouldn't be shocked. But I also won't be completely shocked if Syria finally, after years of civil war and brutality, that they'll find some sort of way to make towards peace. I kind of skipped over this particular fact, but Bashir al-Assad is responsible for killing at least, as far as we know, 500,000 of his own people. And half the country of Syria has immigrated, to either other Middle Eastern nations or to Europe, and in some cases here. They had a population around 24 million before this civil war started. Now their population is estimated to be about 12 to 12.5 million. because of all the immigration and deaths. So I hope that this is a new start for Syria. I just hope also our leaders keep their eyes open and understand that who we're dealing with. We're not dealing with Boy Scouts here. And so, or Democrats, wanting a free and independent Syria under democratic rule. But I hope we can come to some accommodation. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about something that happened last night, a lot closer to home. Last night at the city council meeting, a major decision and a vote was taken, and we could welcome a new business into town. This was codenamed Project Dough, and what this is that we're going to have a massive bakery in an industrial park called Paris Baguette. This is one of I believe this is their first American presence here, their first American holding and business, and because it's an international business, and it's going to be down in that park, and so we're talking about some major employment opportunities, at least 500 off the top, and probably expanding over the years. And it's not just tax revenue and whatnot, but it's going to be one of the biggest employers in this area. And so yesterday, the mayor was on the show, and you could see yesterday's show to talk a little bit about that. If you want to, we were talking about some of it. He couldn't at that point give me the details. Now they can, because it's now been voted on and open. And I was texting with Victoria this morning, and of course she's exceptionally excited about all of this because of the job opportunities and the tax revenue is going to bring, and the presence is going to give us. This Paris Baguette, I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but it's a major international bakery. Okay, this isn't some small outfit. And so I would check out, I'm sure this is going to be posted pretty soon throughout several of the Burleson related pages, like Municipal Matters and things of that nature. Plus, I'm sure it's on the city council or the city page is whatever. But it's going to be, it said this is our first North American manufacturing plant with 450 new full-time jobs, 165 million minimum total capital investment, which is larger, by the way, than the trade school that's going on beginning in a couple of years over by Chisholm Trail. So this is the biggest thing that's ever happened in Burleson. Okay, put it that way. It's the biggest company investment ever. Okay, they have 4,000 retail stores worldwide, but under 170 in North America. So they're going to try to ramp it up in the next 5 years to get up to 1,000. So you'll be seeing Paris Baguette like you see other similar bakeries all over the place, and they're going to be headquartered, North American headquarters, right here in beautiful Burleson. That's a big deal. So I think Alex Phillips, Andrew Pennywell, and Joni Van Noy, who probably been working a lot on this, I think the city council all deserve, and the city itself all deserve a great deal of credit for bringing this to our community, because it's going to be a real boon to it. It's going to be a lot of jobs for this area of the county and a lot of tax revenue. So anyway, what's going on next week? Let's look on the Monday schedule before I just start rambling off the top of my head, because I've done that before and then found out, oops, I was wrong.
Never.
Well, the 16th on Monday, we're going to have Jessica Bolin, who is the owner of J. Bolin Photography. And she's part of my B&I group, and she's just opened her studio up about 3 months ago. And it's a very nice studio. She's a lovely young lady, and she's going to show some of her work. It's Christmas pictures, Valentine's pictures, Arbor Day pictures, you name it, she'll have it for you. Easter pictures, the whole 9 yards. She does really great photography. She's shown us some of her work in the B&I meetings. So Jay Bolin Photography does exceptional work. Her husband is the associate pastor over at Graceview, and he's kind of temporarily running the show in their pastor search, I suppose. But he's kind of taking over some of the preaching duties. Okay. And then on Tuesday at 10 o'clock, I'm going to be introducing you to the new executive director of Harvest House, Amber Case. She and Jennifer will be here. We're going to talk about, the transition, what goes on next year for Harvest House and things like that nature. On the 23rd, I have Jonathan Moore, who is an old colleague of mine at BHS, and he started a new podcast. Didn't he do a new podcast from this studio?
Yes, sir.
What's that
the
about?
best place to do podcasts.
That's what I'm saying. With this beautiful new studio, absolutely.
Heck yes.
Well, what's his podcast going to be
You'll have to
about?
ask him when he's on the show.
Well, okay.
Why would I spoil it?
Okay. Anyway, and then we're going to take some time off for Christmas. Anyway, but thank you for listening to me ramble, and I hope it clears up some of it. I mean, it's still a very much in fluid situation, and y'all have a great rest of the week.